Tonight, 10 years after his passing, we look at the enduring legacy of Leonard Nimoy and his iconic portrayal of Spock. We'll discuss how Nimoy shaped this character and how it impacts portrayals by Ethan Peck and Zachary Quinto. From amazing moments in TOS to his emotional farewell in Star Trek Beyond, we'll look at the legacy of Leonard and Spock in this special episode of Thursday Night Geeks.
Thursday night, one and all. You know, if it's Thursday, it must be Thursday Night Geeks from Trek Geeks. I'm Bill Smith alongside Dan Davidson, and we're here again for week 4. Dan, people are still watching, so we must be doing something that's pretty okay.
Well, it's got to be all you, because who would want to watch this ugly mug, right?
I don't. That's for damn sure.
I knew that you'd be right there on board with that. It's great to be here, buddy. Week 4, unbelievable. We've had a great time for 3 weeks. We're going to have a great time tonight also, talking about a subject that's very near and dear to both of our hearts. And I'm looking forward to another fun Thursday night with my best bud.
You mean Garcia, right? Because Garcia's in the
control room.
because
she's actually on time. So
making sure that that the trains run on time. Dan, we have a couple of things to share with people. First off,
yes,
as of tonight, there is a brand new TrekGeeks.com.
Yes, there is.
You know, it's live. You can it automatically updates with new episodes, so I don't have to pull my hair out to try to, get content on the website. You can see all of our shows, and the other thing, Dan, is it links to the brand new Trek Geeks shop.
Look at that.
I know, which can also be found at trekgeeksshop.com. This will be for our logo merchandise and our non sort of Star Trek IP related stuff.
Yes.
But you can still get, great Star Trek tees at TeePublic. We still have that storefront too. We get a tiny commission off of those things. But if you're looking for Trek Geeks wear, like say, our celebrating 10 years design is a fashionable mug, 11 ounces.
Well, I'll tell you
at the brand new Trek Geek shop.
I'll tell you right now, that is en route to me as we speak. I went in there and bought one before we went live. So I bought it. So I kind of helped ourselves out with a little bit of revenue for the old podcast. So I can't wait to get it. It'll go right next to my giant pen-filled Trek Geeks mug that I keep at my work desk.
That's like the OG one too.
It is. I love it. Absolutely.
So speaking of containers that hold liquid, Dan, what are you drinking? Please tell me it's not something sad like water.
It is something sad. It's not water. I'm still on the wagon, still doing the diet for a couple more weeks. So you'll have to bear with me for that. I'm doing kind of similar to what I did last week. It's the non-alcoholic tequila. It's got the alcohol removed. With a sugar-free margarita mix and a little splash of cranberry juice in there. So it's kind of like a faux-verita, maybe.
That was dumb.
That was very bad.
Yeah,
but
that was dumb.
It's not awful tasting, and it keeps me I'm not as parched when I drink it. So
I've just got an emergency message from our presenting sponsor, Fansets. Of course, the presenting sponsor of Thursday Night Geeks, presented by Fansets. And they've told me that you're a disappointment to humanity.
Well, I'm not coming from Lou. That's really saying something, though, isn't it?
And I might be lying about the fact that they said that. I think that was me.
I think they love me. So,
well, Dan, I'm using in my Star Trek Discovery camp glass.
Oh,
yes, a little Star Trek Discovery etched logo there, which was a gift from their PR and marketing department. One of those god awful gift boxes they sent out. I'm drinking a BuzzBox Cuban Mojito.
I've had those,
which is delicious. Okay, BuzzBox is not a sponsor. They're not giving us any money. They make the best ready-to-drink cocktails in the world. BuzzBox.com.
BuzzBox.
You dump it, you shake it up, you dump it over ice. I swear to you, this tastes like a mojito that you get anywhere in the Caribbean, just without the leaves of mint. It's amazing.
Now, I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm actually 100% serious when I ask it.
Yeah.
I also know because I've seen some hilarious videos over the Christmas season about Buzz balls. They're balls of alcohol pre-mixed. Do you know if it's the same company?
It is not.
Okay, I was just curious.
And you keep your balls to yourself, mister.
Well said. I like
Thank
that.
you. Thank you. Dan, I'm sorry. I'm getting a message from the Trek Geeks newsroom. This just in, we have official confirmation that Dan Davidson is now an old man.
Yes, so old that I got to put my glasses on right now. Yes, I got my wife a bird buddy for Christmas.
Sure
And
you
I
did.
was just so excited today when we had this wonderful bird show up at our house to have a little breakfast. Love cardinals. And yes, I am old because now something like this just makes my day. And he's just so cute and looking around. And yeah.
Tell the truth. You've filed for AARP, haven't you?
I cannot tell you how much stuff I get for AARP, even though I do not have it. I get it in the mail all the time.
I don't, after seeing this, I don't believe you. One, that cardinal is beautiful. My mom's favorite bird was cardinals. I think of her every time I see one. But I
Same.
also know that my mom would probably poop on you if she were a bird.
Okay, if she were a bird, thank you. Thank you for that clarification. These things are great. I'm just going to do a little plug. I have to take my glasses off because of the reflection.
Hold on. Ross says that AARP is a great thing. You don't have to be an older person. You don't, but in Dan's case, he already is clearly.
It just helps. That's right. Bird Buddy's awesome. If you love birds, they are also coming out with a hummingbird Bird Buddy, which I think is just awesome. I'd have to get one of those too.
Wouldn't that be a hummingbird buddy?
Exactly. I was doing it, breaking it up a little bit for people who were slow like you.
Huh?
Bird Buddy, hummingbird buddy,
Huh?
buddy. Hey, buddy.
Hey, buddy. Yeah. When you showed me that today, I thought it was great for you. I'm still a little annoyed. So let's do this. Let's run a quick segment break, and because I'm calling an audible because I don't have the sheet up because it's asking for my password and I don't have it. And we're going to come right back to have a most logical conversation, Dan.
Very logical. I like
about
it.
Spock and Leonard.
Sounds good.
Well, Dan, we knew this week we were going to have a fairly hostful episode. It's kind of great. It kind of gets us back to our roots.
Yes.
And it occurred to me that in really just over a week, I think it's just over a week, will be the 10th anniversary of the passing of Leonard Nimoy. It happened very early in our run with Trek Geeks. I think it's safe to say that you and I were both shell-shocked at the time and had no idea what to do as podcasters, let alone as fans.
Yeah, it was February 27th. And it's one of those things people talk about, where were you when Kennedy was assassinated? Where were you when the Challenger exploded? This and Renee, I can tell you exactly what was going on. I was in Portland, Maine, working at the company. I worked up there for 10 years. The entire team was walking down to the Old Port for lunch. Anybody who's been in Portland knows the Old Port's where all the bars and restaurants are. It's right on the water. It's great. It's very historic, brick pavement and everything like that. Walking down a hill on that brick pavement, trying not to slip on the ice, when I got the text, I believe from you, that Leonard had passed away. And that was the most depressing lunch I have ever been in my entire life.
I felt like this one hit a little differently because obviously, D. Kelly had passed several years before. We were working together at the time when that happened, and then Jimmy Doohan.
Yep.
But this was Leonard. We've always thought of him as sort of the ideological heart and soul of Star Trek, whether as Spock or as Leonard. And it affected me very deeply. I'm not afraid to say. I felt like a piece of my childhood had sort of been ripped away from us. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does, because it's exactly right. That piece of childhood that, I know how much it meant to you growing up, much it meant to me, that escape that we've always talked about. And yeah, William Shatner was top billing, but people for decades have been saying that Leonard's portrayal of Spock was the actual heart of the original series. And our hearts got ripped out on the 27th of February.
I think it's obvious how important Spock was by how quickly Leonard's fan mail started to equal and then eventually dwarf Shatner's.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing against Bill Shatner. I mean, Captain
No.
Kirk, my boyhood hero. All my interactions with Shatner as a fan have been nothing but delightful. It's not a statement on Bill whatsoever,
Right.
but it was clear to many that Leonard was kind of the touchstone for a lot of people. And I think that it wasn't just in the 60s and it wasn't just in the 70s. I think that it's kind of a through line for our entire fandom from
Mm-hmm.
young child to grown man.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Absolutely, yeah. I remember as a child or as a young kid watching the original series on Channel 56 out of Boston. When I started liking it a little bit more, because as we all know through the talk of 10 years on Trek Geeks, I did not like it when I first started watching it because I was forced to watch it. When I
Right.
started watching it in the late 70s with the first movie coming out, Spock was a character that I attached to, which I think probably almost everybody is going to say. A lot of young white men probably will say that. I know there's a lot of people are going to attach to Uhura. A lot of people are going to attach to Scotty. But I think that Spock was the one that I attached to right away. And that just carried on in the movies. And it was interesting for me to see how much older Spock looked to me in the opening scenes of Star Trek: The Motion Picture on Vulcan as to what I was used to seeing him in TOS, even though it had only been a few years in between.
When you think about how Leonard aged over 10 years time from the end of Star Trek to the beginning of production for Star Trek: The Motion Picture, it it seemed like it seemed like almost an eternity. We'd seen him sort of frozen in time for, the better part of, for us as kids, 6 or 7 years. And then to get to TMP and go, "Wow, he got old." Wait, everybody got old.
Yeah.
It was really kind of a realization even as a 10-year-old kid. It's like, "Oh, oh."
Mm-hmm.
And it was a little weird for a while. It made me think, "Well, this Spock has gotta be different because he doesn't look the same." Um, and obviously that's just ridiculous. I mean, but that's what went through my mind as a kid because the Spock of TOS was my Spock. Does that make sense?
It does. It's interesting that you say that. One of the things that I have always had a hard time grappling with Leonard's portrayal of Spock, because I know we're going to talk about other portrayals, the makeup on old Spock always bothered me.
Really?
Never looked right to me. The ears didn't look right. The eyebrows didn't look right. And that was something that, especially in the last movies that he were in, really, it was something that I just did not like it. I'm like, that is not the Spock that I recognize. And I understand Leonard was much older, makeups change. And there was always these big things. Oh, we have Spock's ears encased in acrylic if you want to buy them at auction, stuff like that. It just looked different to me than what we were used to seeing from TOS. And it's also a little scary to think, if my math is right, which
Math is hard.
we are older than Leonard Nimoy was when he filmed TNG, the motion picture.
What?
Age-wise. I think he was. Wasn't he only in his maybe his 40s, maybe maybe early 50s when TMP was filmed?
Wow. I've never thought of this.
Yeah, it's amazing when you think about it. It blows my mind that we're at the age and we're looking back and saying we're older than the people that were at the time that this was done. For example, total offshoot, but it just had to bring it up. We're watching Three's Company right now. Mr. Furley is 52 in the Three's Company series.
You shut your mouth.
I looked it up when we were watching it the other day. And I'm like, oh my God, he looked like he was 100 back then. And we are now older than he was. But I feel the same way with I feel the same way with Leonard. It blows my mind to think that we're older than he was when that was being filmed.
Leonard was apparently in his late 40s, according to Garcia, in the control room at the time of TMP. So I guess
Yeah.
that makes sense. God, we're really old. How old do you think Don Knotts' hair was on top of his head? It was probably like only 2 or 3 years old, right?
Yeah, I'm thinking probably yes. Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
you
He
think
had to get,
anybody believed that wasn't a rug?
oh, I don't think so. I don't think so, but I loved it. He was always doing his little head shaking and like that. Loved him. But yeah, we're old, dude.
Yeah.
That's why I watch Birds.
That's why, yeah, I'm not watching Birds. No way. I feel like I've got a while before that happens. I can imagine actually my parents at my age had a bird feeder up in our big sun porch up in Guilford,
Mhm.
New Hampshire. And eh, they would watch the birds and they were in their
Mhm.
50s. And I'm like, damn it.
Welcome to the party, pal.
Oh, I hate you so much now. Um, so much. I uh, so when you talk about the makeup not being right for Spock, did you miss the eyeshadow too? Was that a critical piece
I
for you?
I kind it wasn't a critical piece, but it was something that I did. It made him look different, even though it was the same actor. It's something that always bothered me. I will say maybe Star Trek 4 onward is where it most was troublesome for me. Of course, in Star Trek 4, he had a headband on most of the time, so you couldn't really tell.
Right.
Definitely 5 and 6. Um, and I don't know, maybe I don't know why the reasoning, if it was a cheaper budget with 5 or I don't know, but definitely in those later movies, it was just something. It was a little distracting for me to tell you, to be honest with you.
The undeniable thing, at least, is that Leonard brought a I'm gonna try to choose these words carefully, a poise and a gravitas to Spock that I think made him utterly credible. You know, we knew that he was half human, but, Leonard Spock wanted nothing more to be more Vulcan than Vulcan, I
Mhm.
think a lot of ways. Um, I think that when we go back and we watch these episodes of TOS, I think the reason he's so invaluable to Kirk is because of that sort of unemotional, passionless quality that is the complete opposite of Kirk. And Leonard just truly understood it from the jump. And I think that it does a great job of elevating Shatner's performance as well.
Yeah, and one of the things I also liked is that emotionlessness was there as much as he could muster it, but he still had his dry humor moments that he was able to throw in at the end of episodes before the regular everybody laugh as the music is playing and the camera is panning out. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I don't think it was just Shatner. I think the way that he was able to portray the character and act and really put that Vulcan mystique into Spock helped everybody around him. Nichelle, Jimmy, Walter, everybody.
I'm going to say something that might be a little um, incendiary. It might cause people to really bristle, but I'm going to say that the two best actors on that set, just as far as ability and range, were Leonard and D. Kelly. Those two shine in everything they get, and I think that's true even in the movies to some extent. But I mean, D. Kelly was such a tried and true character actor that I think there's many times where he outshines even Leonard, which is super hard to do.
Wow. Hmm.
And again, nothing against Shatner. Shatner is a fantastic actor. I mean, he's an Emmy winner. He's created more iconic characters in pop culture than any other actor before him or since.
Yeah.
But I genuinely think the two best actors on that set on any given day were Leonard Nimoy and D. Kelly.
I don't just I don't really disagree with that. It's funny, we've never had a deep dive into McCoy. We're gonna have to do that now, whether it's here on Thursday Night Geeks or on the podcast. I think you're absolutely right. Every time, and this is another thing with everybody. A lot of people dump on TMP, which I don't understand. I love TMP for a lot of the things that it brings. But whenever I think of D. Kelly, the first thing that always comes into my mind is Disco Bones with the beard and the open shirt and the big medallion every single time. Yeah.
I think one of the things that I appreciate about Spock and his growth over TOS is that, I mean, he starts from a place of being the best first officer in the fleet, according to Kirk.
Mhm.
But there's still many things he hasn't done. I mean, you get to Galileo 7 and he's never really commanded an away mission. You
Right.
know, he's left with decisions that he's never been faced before in a variety of episodes. And by the time you get to season 3, after they steal his brain, um, Spock has become really sort of a pivotal figure, you know, in Starfleet to some extent, to the point where, you know, he becomes a power player later on in the movies in Star Trek 6.
hmm
I think it speaks to the way Spock was written, and I think it speaks a lot to the way that Leonard or it speaks a lot to the decisions Leonard made in his performance as well.
I agree that it has a lot to do with how stuff was written back in the '60s with TOS. I mean, you look at television now, everything is so serialized and there are so many details that are written far before the episodes themselves are even written. And I don't think they did that back in the 60s. I mean, they
No.
just did all these things. Oh, he's the best first officer in the fleet. And then 2 seasons later, you're like, oh, wait a minute, he's never actually, commanded an away mission. He's never lost anybody in the line of duty or anything like that. So it's kind of like, oh, all right, well, that's the way we wrote it back then. But you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Let's just make the ambassador his father.
Exactly. Yep. Yep. And even though we talked about him in the past tense in the first season, that's okay.
Right? Right. You know, and that's the other thing too. Spock is essentially a child of privilege. You know,
A little bit.
he's kind of left his life on Vulcan behind. You know, the Vulcan Science Academy. He's like, live long and prosper, a-holes, and he decides to join Starfleet. Um, you know, now fandom seems to have this, this memory of Spock being the only Vulcan in Starfleet, and that's just not true. He's not the
Yeah.
first Vulcan in Starfleet. He's not the only Vulcan in Starfleet, considering an entire ship full of Vulcans.
I was just going to say there's a whole ship of them, I think so.
Yeah, it
Intrepid.
blows up, and Spock
Yeah,
goes,
just died. And all 400s of all Vulcan aboard, all dead.
I mean, how does he know? They didn't scream.
Oh, but you did a good impersonation just now.
Thank
too,
you.
so I was
Thank you.
like, yeah, absolutely. All cried out. Did they? Did they though?
I mean,
We don't.
so I mean, the sort of Kotrick projection you get in Star Trek Discovery season 1, is that how he knew?
Yeah,
I don't
I
know.
forgot about that.
Well, that's because you're just not a real Star Trek fan, gatekeeper. I think that Spock doesn't become a revered and beloved character in science fiction or pop culture without the intelligence that Leonard brings to the role. He
Mhm.
knows Spock's not going to be as violent, so he creates the Vulcan nerve pinch. He creates this whole lore regarding, the Vulcan hand salutes,
Yeah.
and other things, that seem to make sense for Spock. They're very smart decisions. Because yeah, I don't see Spock beating the crap out of anybody unless it's in Star Trek Into Darkness. Did I say that out loud?
Or mirror, yeah, and mirror.
Yeah.
Even
Well,
then,
that's
not really. Not
that's a
even.
little different though.
Yeah. hmm
And I guess Into Darkness is a little different too, being the whole Kelvin timeline. Um, but I think it's those things, those incredibly smart qualities they gave Spock that said, he's different. Whereas Kirk is rough and tumble, Spock is going to think his way out of the situation and still save the day.
Spock is the Picard of TOS.
Interesting.
Just
I
that just
never would have
popped into
thought
my
that.
head because we always talk about Kirk is the fighter, Picard is the negotiator. Bring it all into the same time frame. Kirk is the fighter, Spock is the negotiator, or the level-headed commander.
It's interesting. It's very rare that you actually come up with something that makes sense.
It happens every once in a while.
It really does. And this is that once in a while. So you've had your one for this decade.
I'm gonna take it
You're
and run with it.
all set until 2035.
Good. It's all on you now.
Oh God, again?
It's your own doing.
Again? I'm so screwed. Um, The other thing I appreciate about Spock is his evolution between, say, the motion picture and the Wrath of Khan. Whereas he's this sort of character that has kind of lost his way and rejected total logic in the Kolinahr in the motion picture. He's the captain of a Starfleet training vessel in Star Trek 2. With those years that have gone by, however many they are, which fandom don't seem to agree on. He clearly decides, you know what? This is who I am. This is who I was always supposed to be. Why am I evading it in a sense? Unfortunately, it's a path that sets him, unfortunately, to an untimely demise.
Yeah. But then again, it's part of the path, I think. And one that cements the character even more into the level that the character is at. One of the things that I found interesting between TMP and Khan, which you brought up, is his look. We talked about the makeup, and that's one thing, but in the look, you can tell he looks lost in TMP. That first scene of Wrath of Khan, not when they're in the simulator, but when he's walking down the hallway with Kirk, you see that, I don't know if regalness is the right word, but, of course, the uniforms have a lot to do with it, because the first time we seen the Maroons, and they look fantastic. He just looks certain. He looks like he is in control. And it's something that goes throughout the whole course of the movie until bad things happen at the end.
Some shit happens.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, spoiler alert. I guess that's really not a spoiler. The movie's only 43 years old this year.
Throw up Helen's comment, because that's a good one. Because absolutely 100% right. I have thought of that myself many times. The perfect Vulcan bowl cut is just a mess in TMP.
You're not wrong. Either of you, quite honestly. Sorry, I looked for a second because I had a timer running on my other workstation. Apparently, Google a timer. It sends off this horrible ringing sound directly into my ears. So I think I'm a skosh deaf right now.
Sounds like a Farkism, I think.
No,
it's not that bad.
No, not at all. Jim says we can go back to groaning at Farkisms.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate that.
We might do that in just a moment here. We're about to do a little business with America. So stay here and we will be right back. Dan, I'm copy free tonight. We're just going to wing this. It wouldn't be Thursday night without our presenting sponsor. And that is, of course, our dear friends at Fansets. They have been with us for so many years now.
Yeah.
We are coming now into our 8th year with Fansets as a direct sponsor of Trek Geeks. And we're so grateful to them for all of the great years and the partnership we've developed with them.
Great years, great partnerships, so many fun times out in Vegas and other conventions across the country, spending time. They are family, the very definition of family. It's always great to talk about them. It's always great to get together with them. And it's always great to talk about the newest pins that they have over at fansets.com. And they have some right now, some brand new ones just came out this week. We're going to talk about them right now. The first one up, we're talking about TMP a lot tonight. It's from the ever-expanding Delta collection. You can get the TMP Medical Delta in all its brilliant lime green goodness. I didn't even realize that there was a lime green badge or Delta in the Star Trek universe, but there it is. It's available in both pin and magnet form, as all of their Deltas are. And from the wonderful and awesome dedication plaque collection, the USS Voyager is now available, and it's available to anyone in either the Alpha or Delta quadrant. So people in the Gamma quadrant, tough. And Bill, this is a good one. I think you had a little sneak peek, but it's just that important. From Enterprise, maybe the most important member of the crew of the NX-01. It is Porthos the Beagle, finally available as a pin. Get it right now at fansets.com.
I just want to say one of the great things about Fansets is that so far we've had 2 pins of dogs, number 1 and Porthos.
That's right.
And none of of any cats, which I'm fine with, quite frankly.
There's no
now, but
grudge pin?
I don't think there is.
Ah, wow. Okay.
Now,
Well,
before
probably nothing
anybody
wrong with
ats me, I am allergic to cats, which is why I don't have a fondness for them. That
Huh.
and well, cats typically are just jerks.
It's probably good that they don't have a bill pin either, because I'm allergic to bill. So whatever. Anyway, go ahead. You were saying?
Yeah, well, I think I was going to say that, of course, we want you to get all those pins. We want you
Yes.
to put them all in your cart, the Porthos
Yep.
pin. Maybe put a few of those in your cart. And then
Sure.
the TMP Delta. Get them
Green.
both pin and magnet. Green, that sort of lime 70s green. It's beautiful. And then get that Voyager dedication plaque and thumb your nose to all those people in the Gamma Quadrant. And at checkout, use the special discount code word Trek Geeks. That's Trek Geeks in all capital letters, no spaces, to get 10% off your entire order
That's
at
a lot.
fansets.com.
Mhm.
That is a lot. You add all those pins, you are saving yourself a bunch of money. And of course, Dan, the best part is once you clear that $30 threshold in the United States, you automatically get free shipping.
So that's a lot of savings. 10% off plus free shipping, because when you go to Fansets, you're going to spend more than $30 because
Totally.
I got so much great stuff. Yeah, that's fantastic. You know what? I'm going to say it. I say it every week, and I love
Can I
it.
tell you a story real quick before you do
Yeah.
that?
Oh, absolutely.
So as you know, about almost a year ago, I moved to North
Yes.
Carolina to the
Thank God.
Trek Geek Southern Command.
Yeah.
And I had all of my Fansets pins in a box. There were binders. There were, shipping envelopes, and
Mhm.
ones I haven't put in binders yet. There were probably 7 big padded shipping envelopes on top of the binders.
Yeah.
That box weighed a metric ton. And I need to start creating a database of all the pins I have.
I have one. I created a spreadsheet, and I got it all broken down between series and dedication plaques and deltas. And oh yeah, you got to do it. They make them out of pure neutronium, so that's probably
They
why
do.
they're so heavy.
And if you just think about it, using that 10% code, I have saved a ton of money.
Oh yeah. Yep.
So that's my story. I'm sticking to it, Dan.
I like it. Can I wrap it up now?
Yeah, please. You're killing me.
Okay. Here we go. Fansets. Our pins have character, and we thank our friends at Fansets for being the presenting sponsor of Thursday Night Geeks.
So, Dan, as we move on to talk about our friend JC at Kryptonite Creations, the box that was supposed to come to me a day is delayed because it snowed here in North Carolina.
Oh, okay. So everything shut down then.
It actually did. Up where Ross is, up by the Virginia border, he got like 6 or 7 inches of snow. I only got like 2.5. But it shut down. There was a state of emergency because we just don't have the infrastructure to deal with this.
Yes. Yes.
So that box from JC is still on its way to me. It should be here soon. I'm looking forward to it, but I keep going back to this TMP phaser. We keep talking about TMP tonight.
Got mine right here tonight.
Ross thanks me for bringing the snow down here. Are you also blaming me for all the amazing weather I brought this summer? Because I brought that too.
Sorry, I blame for everything too, Russ.
TMP Type 2 phaser is fantastic. I love it. I pretend I'm shooting Dan with it all the time. And
Wow.
I can't wait to see what's in the box because he said there's stuff in the box he hasn't told me about.
Oh,
Yeah.
all right. Fantastic.
We want everyone to go to kryptonitecreations.myshopify.com. JC has great prices. I mean, I am going to buy a 3D printer. I don't have the time to set that thing up and figure out how it works. I don't have the time to use those design files. Honestly, I'm not that bright. But JC is, and he's making all of these things and selling them cheaper than almost anybody else on the internet.
Yeah, I would say yes.
Yeah,
To that.
having looked myself. So,
Yeah.
Dan, I think everybody should get on over to his site.
Yeah, absolutely. Kryptonitecreations.myshopify.com. I am going to point out one thing, and it's not his fault at all. And don't worry about it. We talked about the Discovery phaser and that on the website. It had lights and sound. It does not. That was an error on the website. He feels terrible about it. Doesn't matter because it still looks freaking amazing. So you need to get one. The price is the best price I've seen for something that looks as authentic as it is. So yeah, kryptonitecreations.myshopify.com. They're lightweight. They feel great, man. I can just imagine vaporized. There's a vaporized button. Bill, vaporized, gone. I love it. It's
And they're hand painted.
They are hand painted. Yeah, he does just a fantastic job. So check him out, and you're not going to be disappointed. I guarantee it. I do want to say one other thing about Fansets, because we're talking about our sponsors right now. Sabrina asked a very interesting question in the chat, and I think, Sabrina, you need to bring that up to Fansets. Send them a message in Facebook. Go to their website. Go to the on Facebook. Go to their page, and in the messenger, ask the question. There should be a Salot pet or a Sell It if you're McCoy, because I don't know, because it changes how it's said in different. But that's a great idea for a pin, and I'd love to see that. So let's make it happen. Right?
Kryptonite Creations. That's kryptonitecreations.myshopify.com. Check them out today. We'll be right back. So Dan, let's talk a little bit about the time we met Leonard Nimoy before we talk about the mantle of Spock.
Yes.
We had the opportunity to meet Leonard while we were working together in Merrimack, New Hampshire.
Yep.
At, of all places, a bookstore in the Pheasant Lane Mall in Nashua, New Hampshire, because he was signing copies of I Am Spock. And I think we both thought we were going to get fired for going. Because we were going in the middle of the day. And it turned out to be an amazing experience.
It really was awesome. And yeah, who would have thought that Leonard, well, of course he was from Massachusetts, so maybe it makes sense that he was at the big mall, because the mall in Nashua, Pheasant Lane was really big at the time. So maybe it made sense that he showed up in Nashua. But yeah, we absolutely had to be there. I'm trying to remember, and you know how this memory is. Just I can't remember. Did I have him sign that book, or did I bring was it out yet? The CD audio of Spock and Q that was narrated by Leonard and John Delancey. I'm wondering if I had him sign that for me instead. I'll have to go through my collection of stuff downstairs. Yeah, that was an incredible, incredible day. And of course, back then, no cell phones really of anything like the flip phone or anything. So we didn't have any way to take pictures or anything like that, because I'm sure that would have been just amazing. He was, as you would expect, just the most gracious of people. It was such an honor. The line was very long, wrapped down the entire length of the Pheasant Lane Mall, but it was certainly worth it, because we got to meet a legend and one of our childhood heroes.
That copy of I Am Spock, which I read cover to cover, maybe a dozen times, is probably my most valued part of my Star Trek collection. Because I watched him sign it. He didn't personalize it. He just signed it. I had a flood of my storage unit. I want to say about 10 years ago now. And I lost all of my hardcover books except that one.
That's a sign.
And I was blown away. It was in, a tub with a bunch of other books. It was sitting on top. Somehow it spared getting completely soaked. All the other books were sitting in this, puddle of water in the bottom of the Rubbermaid storage container, which was gross. It was a storage bill in an old storage unit in an old mill building in Manchester. So, it looked, it was nasty. But it was the only book that I got to keep out of all of them.
That's great.
And I'll never forget it. I was so glad that it wasn't lost, because I feel like it would have taken something away from the memory. Does that make sense?
Oh, it absolutely does. And I know that I really think it's the CD I had him sign.
I think it is too.
In my head. And to tell you the truth, it's probably packed in all my Star Trek collectibles from our move from Maine. That probably hasn't come out yet. I'm going to have to go dig that up. Because it is a special, it's a special thing. We've talked about, how many times have we talked about, make sure you go and talk to those people that are important in your life that have been on television and you consider heroes, because you never know when they're not going to be around anymore. We had that opportunity. I'm very thankful we did. I didn't learn from it way back then because I didn't do it at conventions in years after, and I've lost the opportunity to talk to some of my most favorite Star Trek character actors.
I will never, ever forget being at STLV, Star Trek Las Vegas, and I think it was 2011 for Leonard's last Vegas.
Mm.
And I swear to you, there was not a dry eye in that room.
Yeah.
That room was filled with love. It was filled with tears. It was happy. It was sad, because we all knew going into it that it was his last Vegas. And, he sort of did this slideshow of his life, as, almost as if he knew that, he probably wouldn't be seeing many more fans in the future, period.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just a wonderful tour of how he grew up, how he got his start. It was a wonderful reintroduction to him as a person, as more than just Spock or a guy who directed Star Trek movies. And I will always treasure the memory of being in that room. We've talked about how we were in the room for Patrick Stewart when he announced he was coming back to Star Trek. That's the second best thing that I ever saw at a convention.
Yeah. Yeah.
Getting to see Leonard, give that last hour and however many minute long panel was probably one of the greatest moments of my fandom, man.
I
snot running down my face.
Right now? Oh, no. Sorry. I can imagine. I had not gotten into the convention scene really when that took place. I think one of the only conventions I had been at before then was in Nashua at the Holiday Inn off of Northeastern Boulevard.
Which isn't even there anymore.
It's not even there anymore. Delancey was there. But was it his last convention because of the COPD had already started affecting him, or was it just because he was getting old and wanted to spend time with his family and do other things?
I think it's a little of both. I don't think at that point we knew he had COPD.
Okay.
At least I could have that wrong. Because I'm trying to rely mostly on memory, and that's, Swiss cheese on any given day. But I do know that he was, making a point to say that he was stepping away from, from sort of public life. I imagine it's probably because his condition was growing worse.
Yeah. It's interesting because he had stepped away from doing a lot of stuff. Was it after that convention? I'll have to check the internets here, when he decided to come back to do some acting and did some fringe work. Was that after he said goodbye to Star Trek conventions?
No, I'm fairly certain that was before.
Okay. I just wasn't sure. I couldn't remember when fringe aired.
I want to say it was like 2008, maybe.
I'm checking right now, actually.
September
2008 to the 2013 is when it ended. So yeah,
and he wasn't in.
He's already done.
He wasn't in all the episodes, but he certainly played a really pivotal part there as part of Fringe. Those were moments I'll never forget, because for as much as Captain Kirk was my boyhood hero, I felt like Spock is part of the reason I have the career path I do, both Spock and Scotty. Because it's all about being able to evaluate things dispassionately, right? I felt like Spock was a bit more of a touchstone than Kirk was. I was a sensitive kid. I wasn't going to go punching bad guys in the face or whatever. But Spock was deliberate. Spock was well thought out. Spock was logical, and suppressed those areas of himself that might jeopardize that. And so I always felt a special connection to Spock in that sense. Did you ever really feel that kind of connection?
I don't recall, to be honest with you. If anything, it was a connection of feeling like an outsider. Okay. Because I think Spock considered himself an outsider. He was on the ship full of humans. He was trying to grapple with his half human, half Vulcan, lineage. And I think he felt like he wasn't part of the group. Just because of the non-emotion thing. But you would see, everybody would be sitting, laughing, talking, everything, and he'd just be kind of standing there. And you got to wonder if that half human part of him was thinking he's kind of an outsider. And as someone who felt as an outsider most of my growing up years, if there's anything that I may have connected with him on, it was probably that.
I can appreciate that. I think that, nerd culture was certainly very different back then. You mentioned to somebody you were a Star Trek fan in the 70s or 80s, and you probably got
Right.
beaten up.
Yep.
I can remember receiving more than a couple of beatdowns as a kid from bullies simply just because I was a Star Trek fan.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I can respect that. Obviously, since Leonard stepped away from Spock, and since we've gotten new Star Trek, both in film and television form, it has made sense to various individuals at Paramount and various creatives to bring back the Spock character. Obviously, we've had some wonderful people inhabit that role, in Zachary Quinto and Ethan Peck.
Mm-hmm.
Both of them have brought their own wonderful sense of, whether it's comic timing or logic or whatever, to Spock in their own way. I really feel like they've both taken the opportunity to make that character something of them, if that makes sense. But I don't mean for this to anger anybody or to crap all over Zachary or Ethan, but I just don't feel the same way about their Spock as I do about Leonard's Spock, and I feel somewhat conflicted about it.
What I'm going to say might even be more harsh than that. I have no connection to either new Spock at all.
Okay.
I don't. And that's not saying anything negative towards Ethan or Zachary. They are both wonderful actors. They were given a burden to play this iconic character that is beloved throughout the world. There is not a place on this planet where if you say the word Spock, nobody's going to know who that is. It's just not going to happen. It's going to be extremely rare that somebody's not going to know what the word Spock is. And they were given a burden to play this character. They bring their own things into it. It just does not have the same emotional bearing on me that Leonard's portrayal does. Again, don't get pissed off, people. We're not saying it in any way that's meant to be mean or negative. There are times where you're going to have characters on shows that you don't have any connection to. I just don't have that connection. If I had to choose between one or the other, I have more of a connection to Ethan Spock than I do to Zachary Spock. Again, nothing against Zachary or Ethan. I think that Ethan's character, maybe I don't have that connection because there's way more emotion in his character, but it's at a time in Spock's life where there was more emotion. We saw a little bit of emotion when Leonard touched the plants and smiled in the cage. So, he's dealing with emotion. It just isn't something that I grasp onto the way that I grasped onto that outsider Spock that we just talked about a few minutes ago.
No, I can appreciate that. And in a way, and I blame, not really blame, I guess blame's not the right word. I figure this probably has something to do with the writing of the character in both cases, for both Ethan and for Zachary. I feel like that in the scripting process, they're relying too much on, well, he's a younger Spock, he's not fully in control of his emotions. I feel like I take some issue with that because I don't think that Spock would have joined Starfleet in either case. I don't think, unless he had a great control of his human side and were able to suppress it as well. I think that Ethan Spock gets closer to that because we've seen him more, honestly.
True. Yep.
But I honestly get the sense that I feel like the writers in both cases have missed the mark there.
Yeah, well, we talked about it before. It's interesting, though, that we say that the writers for these future shows, meaning now, missed the mark, where back in the 60s, they didn't write any of the shit. I mean, it was just, there was so many gaps and everything with the character that Leonard built it all himself, where these people have written so much backstory and wanted to fill in all those cracks and missing parts that we've seen over the course of decades. That is it a little bit too much? I mean, I'll for an example, during the time of TOS, we know that Chapel loved Spock, was in love for him for so
Right.
long, and this, that, and the other thing. Never in a million years would I have expected to see what happens in Strange New Worlds between the two of them.
Yes.
I'm not saying that's bad.
No.
It's unexpected, but it still leaves me not really grasping this Spock character in Strange New Worlds. Again, not a criticism. It's just I guess that what I would say, I guess the way to say it to not be mean to the actors is my love for the Leonard Spock can never be overcome by another Spock.
Do you think
actor.
that's because that Leonard Spock came at such a young and important age for us? You know, it sort of, we grew up with it. It was all we knew for, 16 years practically.
Yeah.
Actually less, probably closer to 10 years until TNG premiered. 10, 12 years, whatever.
I absolutely believe that. Yeah. I mean, you look at people, look at how people at a young age got connected to specific characters on TNG. Or
that's fair.
somebody, maybe, I don't know if this will happen because it hasn't been along as much, but maybe somebody's going to grasp on to this Ethan Spock in a way that we did. I don't know if it's possible because it's Leonard versus Ethan in terms of Spock, but then they would go back and watch the Leonard Spock and not have any connection to him at all. Maybe that's a possibility. It all depends on where you were in your life at the time that actor was portraying the character.
Helen brings up a great point here. She's like, I like Strange New World Spock, but I think the writers have tried to explain things that need no explanation. 100%. I couldn't agree with that more.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
Not every mystery needs to be, revealed or solved.
Right.
Especially, we don't need to tie everything back and make canon all nice and pretty. Sometimes, threads get left off of people's lives, and that's fine.
Look at Lost.
Oh, don't even start with that bullshit show.
I knew you were going to do that. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Sometimes it's good to have a loose thread. Right?
There are things I don't know about you, just as there are things you don't know about me.
Yep.
But I've known you now for almost 30 years. We talk every day, but I guarantee you that there are parts of my life that you'd find out about someday and go, really?
Yes.
And just, I think the same is true. I don't think we need an explanation for everything that happened to Spock, pre-TOS. I don't think it's necessary. I agree with that.
Absolutely right. Yep. I agree with that. Good call. Boy, you're smart.
Helen's smart. It's not me.
Helen, you're smart.
There are times where I like the JJ movies, and there are times where I can't stand them. And a lot of it has to do with the characterizations of Spock. I want to point out one thing here. Yes, I agree with the sisters. I do want the Uhura backstory because Uhura didn't have enough to do during TOS, and the stuff we got in the movies was fantastic.
Okay, you know what's interesting? What we're talking about, I can see myself having a stronger connection to Celia's performance.
Yes.
Probably because they didn't give Nichelle enough to do back in the 60s.
But I'm going to say Nichelle was kind of my first crush. So
yes, I know that you've said that many times. Yep. Absolutely.
I love Celia. I love what she's doing with Uhura. I love the story they're creating for her because Uhura actually has a story now.
Exactly.
Spock has always had one.
Yep.
So yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Where was I?
You were talking about
JJ movies.
I am.
I don't like the way Spock has been written in those movies. Because he's a little too, and Into Darkness is probably the best example of this. He's a little too rageful. If it had happened that way in the prime timeline where Kirk had died, our Spock would not have, wanted revenge or gone for blood or chased Khan halfway around San Francisco or wherever, Perdition's Flame, you name it. He wouldn't have beat him half to death or screamed.
Snapped his arm.
Yeah. He would have proceeded about it in a very logical way.
Yeah.
I understand that Spock is technically younger, but if he's that younger, why was he the first officer of the Enterprise under Pike?
He's younger. He's gone through more in that timeline with the death of his mom, and all the stuff that took place on the destruction of Vulcan, all that kind of stuff. I can maybe understand maybe a little bit of the rage based on that, but I don't disagree with you at all. I mean, there are aspects of it. I will say, we talk about first of all, I love the Kelvin movies, hands down. I love them.
I do too.
I enjoy them. They're a lot of fun. I find it interesting that just a minute ago I was talking about the backstory of Spock with Chapel and him, and how that's interesting. I never really got the Uhura Spock connection in the Kelvin movies. It just didn't. It wasn't something that I another thing I didn't grasp onto with the movies.
I'm okay with Spock having a relationship with a human female.
Yeah.
Because I feel like he would have done that. And I mean, Spock could do a lot worse than Zoe Saldana or
True.
Jess Bush. I mean,
Yeah.
they are both amazing.
Yep.
Both as actors and, just they're gorgeous. But I don't know that it necessarily had to be somebody on the Enterprise.
Right.
I'm glad that they're rounding out his backstory with T'Pring, but
Yes,
everyone on the
true.
Enterprise knows her, so I don't know why anyone's surprised in Amok Time when she shows up later and go, Spock, that's my wife, and everyone's like,
it's like dun dun dun, fade to black.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So I know we're getting close to time. I want to ask you if you have, like, let's say you want to watch some Spock. Do you have a single go-to TOS episode that is your all-time favorite Spock episode?
Thinking about it off the top of my head, I don't think I have a favorite all-time Spock episode, but if I want to watch a Spock episode, I know a lot of people can't stand it. I love Spock's Brain, and I'll watch Spock's Brain all the time because it's just a great one. It's a good, fun, wacky story, and it centers around Spock. So I would say I might go with that one first. I guess that's Galileo 7. We talked about it a little bit. That's another one that's a good Spock episode. We get to see big hairy creatures running around. So I would say that's another good one. Of course, Amok Time is a good one also. What about you?
My answer has changed over time. Because like Sabrina, it used to be Amok Time. Now it's the Menagerie. Because of what Spock does for Chris Pike. And it's kind of neat now because you can watch kind of that whole arc and go from the Discovery episode where Pike gets the time crystal. The name escapes me now, but I was talking about it yesterday and I remembered it. And then you can go to A Quality of Mercy.
Oh,
and then you can go to you could also watch the Telosian episode from Discovery.
Mm-hmm.
Or in there you gotta watch the Menagerie. And I think that it tells such a perfect story of the relationship of Spock and Pike and the kind of devoted figure that Spock is.
Yeah.
He doesn't just work with these people. They're his found family. And I think that that's an important quality in every Spock, whether it's Ethan or Zachary or Leonard. I think that that is one through line for all of their performances. That to me, it says a lot.
Yeah, I agree. I do agree. The Menagerie and all the tied ones are very important. I forgot two, which actually are ones that are two of my favorite that I can't believe I didn't think of off the top of my head. Journey to Babel, because you do get that relationship with the family. And at the end of the episode, when they're in bed after the surgery, McCoy's like, "Shut up!" I mean, that's just awesome. Anyway, but I've always loved All Our Yesterdays. I've always loved that as a Spock episode, even though it's like, okay, he just went through a time door and all of a sudden he's reverting back to those emotions so quickly. But I just love the story. I love the Zarabeth angle. And that, of course, coincides with an amazing novel about Spock that I talked about with Corian years ago. But yeah, that's another great episode.
Can I just say, I mean, Captain Kirk gets the reputation for getting all the space hotties, right? But Spock gets with both Marriott Hartley and Jill Ireland. I just want to throw that out there. Spock has game. Helen also brings up Yesteryear, which, by the way, is a great Spock episode of the animated series. Fantastic.
Yes. Yeah.
Adds so much to the lore of Spock. I think it's a super important episode.
I'm trying to think of the name of the novel about what happens after Zarabeth. Spock has a son.
Yesterday's Son.
Yeah, I think that was
Oh,
it.
yeah, AC Crispin.
Yep. So yeah, I mean, there's so many great. Nicely done, my friend.
Thank you.
There's so many great Spock episodes. But yeah, if somebody says, "What are you going to watch for a Spock episode?" Spock's Brain is probably going to be the first one I say, even
That's
that may not be the best Spock episode.
Because he's the one who really does the least in that episode.
It's like me. That's why I love it so much.
So it sure is. I know we're running a little over time, Dan. We want to talk a little bit about a programming note, but also want to remind people that coming up Saturday, April 5th, 9:45 a.m. Pacific, Trek Talks 4. The fourth one so far in the first 3 years. We've raised close to $350,000 along with our friends at Roddenberry and Sci-Fi Sisters and Trek Movie for the Hollywood Food Coalition. We hope that everybody turns up for that. And of course, Dan, next week, unfortunately, we won't be here. And that's because I have to travel for work.
Yes, you do.
So
Bad
I'll be on
boy.
I know. I'll be on a work trip. But in 2 weeks' time, you and I are going to take on the topic, has Star Trek passed us by?
Yeah.
We're going to talk a lot about the Star Trek we grew up with in relation to the Star Trek of today and whether or not we feel the same connection to it. So that's in 2 weeks here on Thursday Night Geeks. If you show up here next week, I'm sure Garcia will be here and he'll regale you with stories of, days gone by.
Yes.
Yeah. Jim again says, no, it hasn't passed us by. Well, honestly, that's one of the things we're going to examine and whether or not it's different for certain age groups.
Right.
We're going to dig into that, hopefully with a couple of sociologists so that we can talk about this phenomenon. So that's in 2 weeks here on Thursday Night Geeks. Dan, good to see you as always, buddy.
Yes. I always have a great time with you and all the people that have sat and listened to us and had some great comments. Always fun to get together with the Star Trek family every Thursday night. Looking forward to 2 weeks' time, my friend.
Go check out the new TrekGeeks.com and, of course, all our new Trek Geeks logo merch at TrekGeeksShop.com. Until then, we hope you all live long and prosper. Have a great week, everybody, and we'll talk to you all soon. Coconut.
Coconut. Hey, you stole my line.
I know.